All right, welcome back to the sixth episode of the First and 35 podcast. I'm your host, Gus Cousins. This is the third time in 1 week that you're hearing the sound of my voice do a podcast, so I will try to keep this short and sweet since we had a midweek episode of this podcast just a few days ago when we talked to Al's brother. Yes, my ex-co-host Ben Jordan and Al's brother from Overdrive, Mike DeStefano, the host of the Locked On Leafs podcast that you should definitely go take and listen to. We're both on a Skype call with me. We had a very nice long conversation, and that's what took up, the entirety of the last episode of this podcast. So I highly recommend you go listen to that one because that's probably the most interesting episode that you're ever going to hear come out of this. But with that all being said, I'm back on my usual weekend recording session. There's not a whole lot to talk about, so I will definitely try to keep this one short and sweet, hopefully less than half an hour, because I know no one really wants to hear me blabber on about stuff any more than they have to. But thankfully, there's not a whole lot that went on outside of the interview with Al's brother, so I guess I'll just jump right into it. The biggest news, obviously, is the all the ideas floating around the MLB and the MLB season, and are we going to have a baseball season? If we do, how's it going to happen? Yada yada yada. Obviously, it's intermittent right now. Things are happening. People are talking. Solutions to the problems are being discussed. Nothing's fully decided upon. Just recently, all the MLB owners approved a plan, return to play plan. And then they sent that to the MLB Players Association. Obviously, all the players have to agree to it, and by the sounds of it, it's not going to be that simple because on top of the 50% pay cut the players have already received, this new plan proposes that they get another 33% pay cut on top of the 50% one, and quite frankly, I don't think there's a chance in hell that any of the players go along with that. I don't think they should either, and I think this will be dragged on for quite a while. The more technical part of the return to play plan is that the season would be around 80-ish games or so. There would be 14 playoff teams. Obviously, there would be, many medical things. Players would be getting tested frequently. I think somebody said 3 times a week or so. There would be no spitting. There would be no, hugging. There would be no high-fiving, that sort of thing. So there's many layers to this. And obviously the big one that you've already heard many players like Blake Snell come out and talk about is just the absurdity of wanting, the owners wanting them to take another large, massive pay cut to players that, one, are not making a whole lot to begin with, and two, are getting ridiculously ripped off by the ownership of these teams all the time. There's not a chance that, this goes through right away. Players have made that clear that they, don't want to play, put themselves in a public health risk, and still make even less money than what the first deal was signed upon. So I think, obviously right now they're having these discussions, with the Players Association and all that. And, everyone says, we're all very positive that a season will come out of all this. I hope so. I don't think it's for certain that it will happen. In the back of my mind, I want to say that I doubt it, but I mean, optimism, I guess it could happen. Obviously, they're looking at places like Arizona and Florida as 2 hub areas, counties that they want to have, all these teams come down to, and obviously I've talked about in the weeks past, like dividing up the AL East and the NL East is in one division, the Central and Central's in another, and then the West and the West is in the far west side in third division. So there would be new divisions, new teams, a new playoff format, with more teams added, that sort of thing. But obviously, this is all going to come down to when the players, agree to a deal, if they agree to a deal. And I think they probably will eventually, but by then, will it be too late to just pack in and say, yeah, we're going to wait till next year, which I don't think would be a bad idea at all. I wouldn't like to see that, but I think from a health point of view, it's certainly a very distinct possibility that happens. And then along with that, news broke that obviously the 2021 World Baseball Classic has been completely canceled. Some people are saying, it could be postponed, it could be bumped. I have a feeling there ain't no bumping that one because so many events are going to be backlogged already. They may as well just cancel that one and then come back in 2022 and start anew there. But obviously, all these are intertwined and connected, and one thing leads to another. If the MLB deal between the Players Association and the owners eventually does happen, does that spread on like a new path down to try to get this World Baseball Classic, renewed for 2021 and just pushed down because it'll be the MLB players that are playing in it? Will players want to play in it? Like, there's a lot of unanswered questions, and obviously no one knows the answer to them yet because we don't know how long this thing is going to go on for. Probably a lot longer than it should if the U.S. keeps dicking around, but that's another story. But yeah, so it all really depends on, what the bargained agreement is whenever it happens. And, the idea that, the revenue, because we're all, missing out on so much of it, we just pool it and then divide it up at the end. Nice idea, but again, the owners are going to get the majority of that, and the players are going to get ripped off yet again. And I think that's the big thing here. Not to state the obvious, but money's always the major concern, especially if you are making, $1 million a year to play baseball, and you already took a 50% contract wipe, and now you're down to $500,000, and then they want you to take a 33% hike on that. So it really goes down really, really quickly. And, for the big name retired players who've made tons and tons of money, like Mark Teixeira and A-Rod, to come out and say, it's just good for the game that we got to, get the players back in the field and we got to play, and it's going to help heal this country. A-Rod, who has made the most money out of anyone ever in Major League Baseball, I think it's around $450 million. For him to come out and take the owner's side, it's ridiculous that he would think that, anybody wouldn't see right through it. Obviously, the news broke a few weeks ago that him and his wife, Jennifer Lopez, I should say, they wanted to buy the New York Mets, and obviously that deal fell apart. But he still would like to be an owner one day. And so this is a very political move by him to say, I'm going to support the owners here, to say, let's just get the game going. It doesn't matter how much you're getting paid, yada, yada, yada. It's completely pure politicking on his part, because you want to get on the owner's good side. In order to become an owner in the league, every other owner kind of has to accept that. So if you're immediately going against all the owners in the league and what they want to do, and siding with the players wholeheartedly in this deal, and then later on you want to become an owner, it's going to make life very, very difficult for you to get that job, get that spot at ownership, because you've already gone against all the owners once. What makes them think you wouldn't do it again, sort of thing. And obviously it's going to turn some heads the wrong way. Obviously the players are saying, what a joke you are. The owners are saying, yeah, he's right. But if he flipped the argument, went 100% with the players, which he probably should have done if he wanted to pick a side, because he is an ex-Major League player, then all the owners, he would be screwing himself out of, the possibility of getting ownership of the Mets or whatever team down the road. And I mean, I'm sounding like I'm defending him. I'm not trying to. He's a moron. He's one of the most hated ball players of all time. He cheated. He was a complete loser. He's a terrible broadcaster. He should not be having any say in this, no matter how bad the wheel pawns are. For the Mets, and I know A-Rod may be an improvement in that regard, but man, do I really hope he has no part of that, because, it's just, I'm not a fan of seeing him go off and try to run a baseball team. I'm not a fan of seeing Derek Jeter try to do it. I'm not a fan of Mark Teixeira coming out and siding with the owners again. And his comments were, I would play for, pennies on the dollar, in essence, just to get the game going because I'd want to play. That is very easy to say while you were sitting in your multi-million-dollar house, mansion, wherever you are, riding up the storm on this. And you're not going to be a part of the health issue. You're not going to be playing. And I think that's going to be, that's obviously the biggest problematic issue with these comments that these guys are making, these retired players, is that you're trying to get on the owner's good side in the case of A-Rod, and you just completely make a foolhardy comment in the case of Mark Teixeira, not understanding what these guys are going through. If you make a lot of money in the league, that's one thing. You haven't lived through, these guys making next to nothing, getting constantly screwed over in the minor leagues, getting constantly screwed over by ownership. You haven't gone through that. And I think that's the biggest telltale sign of what A-Rod and what Teixeira are saying, is that they obviously have not gone through. And to be quite honest, I don't think either of them have thought it through too well. Because obviously when A-Rod posted that video of him talking about it, there is no way he expected to have that much, resistance to what he was saying. But it came out so horribly, it came out so brutal across the table from everyone else that it was nuts, to be quite honest with you. And it doesn't help the issue. It doesn't help the issue that there are no Major League Baseball games being played right now. It doesn't. It doesn't help that there's no deal. Sit back. You can, I don't even think you should be talking about it, because it sends the message that you're picking sides. And if you're going to pick a side as a former player, you better damn well pick the side of the players. Side with ownership on this is a joke. It's nuts. There's nothing else really to say. It's completely out of the realm of what people were thinking. And, it's going to hurt them in the long run. It's going to hurt the players in the long run because of this. And I know ownership is saying, well, we're not making money either. You're multi-billion dollars. The Tampa Bay Rays, who I think are the smallest market team in the league now, they're still worth billions of dollars. They have no issue in that regard, okay? Every team has the ability to not screw over their players the way they do, but they collectively all do it, and Toronto is no exception. This year was supposed to be the first year that they were increasing minor league player salaries by 50%, I believe. That is a good bonus, but it's still not enough for them. Is it a good start? Absolutely. I didn't see any other team in the league do that. I know it's coming. I hope it's coming for everyone, substantially, but I didn't see anybody else do that. And I think, it's a good start, but it's not one and done, so to speak. You have to keep improving the conditions. You have to keep improving the minor league system for these guys who are not making a lot of money. Some of them are playing in towns that are not very nice, that are not very rich and expensive. They're living off of the bare minimum if they're not being housed by an additional family. It's a tough situation for a lot of these guys, and owners sit back in their, mansions and don't think about it. And I think that's the biggest issue for this. But obviously, just like everything else in the world these days, it'll come down to a wait and see kind of decision. Will they get the deal done? I hope they do. I think they probably will eventually, but by then, will it be too late? I don't really know. It's a wait and see. It changes daily. Obviously, they're talking about it literally right now. And the minute any news breaks, it'll be probably the biggest news in the sporting world right now, because that's what everyone's waiting for, baseball season to come back. And obviously, the decisions are slowly being made in the NHL. And, Adam Silver came out, about a week ago and said, the fate of the rest of the league calendar year will be decided in the next 1 to 3 weeks. And so they're obviously, sending out player surveys. The thing came out where it was in group chats, a yes or no decision. Do you want to, keep playing this year? Which is just a brutally brutal way to do it. But obviously they're trying to get a sense of what the players think too. So, really, it's all starting to come together. Not necessarily in a good way, but it's all starting to leak, and people are starting to hear about, what these leagues are doing. Bundesliga across the ocean just started up, and they had, obviously an empty stadium, but live sporting soccer games going on over there. And that's the first step. It's a good first step, but it's certainly a distant, far ways away to getting back to the normal type of sports that we're used to, with fans crowding stadiums and all that. It's just not going to happen. But signing these deals, getting these leagues back going, are the biggest first step, and I think that'll have to happen sooner rather than later in order to have a successful continuation of the calendar year for these guys. That's about it for the MLB. Very few minor things in the NHL. Alan Shemsky announced his retirement. He was a lifelong NHLer, played 15 seasons with the Oilers, Senators, Stars, and Canadiens. He had 174 goals and 398 assists for a total of 572 points in 845 games. He was an absolutely massive part of that 2006 Edmonton Oilers Cup run. Played very, very well in the playoffs. And obviously, he bounced around a little bit there at the end, and he wasn't as consistent as he was early on. His best games were probably with the Edmonton Oilers, in fact. But I don't think there's a chance in hell they would have gone on that cup run if it weren't for him. He was also obviously, the big goal scorer when Stepan missed that empty net breakaway against the Dallas Stars, and he came back down the other way and put one home to tie the game and send it to overtime. That's probably what he's known best for. But other than that, he's had a great career, and wish him the best. The Ducks also re-signed defenseman Brendan Gooley to a 2-year, $1.6 million deal. He's only played in 30 NHL games because he's only 22. He's very young. Put up 4 goals and 4 assists for 8 points in those 30 games. And obviously, it's a really, really cheap deal. It's $800,000 a year. It's next to nothing, and they just want to see him develop because he's so young. He's only 22. In the NFL, the Raiders signed veteran cornerback Prince Mukamara, yes, that guy, to a 1-year deal with an undisclosed amount that he's going to be paid for. He's 30 now. He's entering his 10th season in the NFL. He's a former first-round pick, bounced around a little bit in the recent years, but I believe for the last 3 years he was in Chicago, and he put up decent numbers there. He'll obviously get most of the starts for the Raiders. And then in really disturbing news, actually, Giants cornerback DeAndre Baker and Seahawks cornerback Quinton Dunbar are both relatively big names. Baker was drafted in 2019, so he's only had one NFL season. They were both arrested in Florida last week. Baker was charged with 4 counts of armed robbery and 4 counts of aggravated assault with a firearm, while Dunbar was only charged for 4 counts of armed robbery. Allegedly, they were working together at a cookout. DeAndre Baker took out a gun at one point and then started robbing all the patrons along with Quinton Dunbar. Apparently, there were getaway vehicles stowed nearby. It was a super big thing. Apparently, Baker at one point yelled at someone else to shoot one of the guests. It was a super big deal, and obviously they're going to get into massive trouble for that because you do not get off the hook on that very easily. And obviously DeAndre Baker was a big part of the Giants' future. They really, really liked him as a cornerback. And Quinton Dunbar, the new Seahawks cornerback, obviously will not be reporting to Seattle whenever the camps open up. Because that's just nuts. Obviously, of course, it happened in Florida. Every nuts thing ever seems to happen in Florida. The Rams unveiled their new uniforms, which in essence look exactly the same as the new Chargers jerseys. They share a stadium. Why not share a jersey, I guess? Same color scheme, same type of yellow, same type of blue. Honestly, you go and look up the Chargers jerseys. Maybe change the font a tiny little bit on the Rams ones, and boom, they're the exact same thing. So there's not a whole lot to talk about there because they're literally exactly the same. Tua Tagovailoa's brother, Tualia Tagovailoa, announced he's transferring to the University of Maryland. Obviously, with the rules, he will sit out the 2020 season. That's really only relevant because he backed up his brother Tua for the last few years. And obviously now he's going to go and he'll sit out, but then he will definitely start because I believe he has 3 years of eligibility left after he sits out this year. And obviously, Maryland's very, very high on him as well. And, when he comes, when draft year comes for him, I would think he's going to probably be a very high-end pick because he didn't play much behind his brother Tua, but he's definitely shown his potential in the past. And obviously he'll get most of the starts at the University of Maryland. Speaking of Tua, the Dolphins signed Tua Tagovailoa to a 4-year, $30.26 million deal, plus a 5th-year option. Obviously, the draft happened so recently that, these signings are going to start coming out soon. Teams going after the player, or not going after, but signing these players who they drafted to massive deals. And obviously, a 4-year, $30 million deal isn't overly massive. It's cheap when you think about it. But also paying a player $30 million with a $19.6 million signing bonus when he hasn't thrown one pass in the NFL yet is a little bit weird to think about. But, they think of him as a future Hall of Famer and definitely the starter for them for a long, long time after Ryan Fitzmagic. goes away. So, it's a good deal, in my opinion. I haven't heard of the deal that came out yet for Joe Burrow. I don't know if that has happened. I don't think it has. But it would obviously be a little bit more than this Tua deal. But I think both of them, whatever they are, or whatever his will probably be, relatively similar. It'll be a lot of money for a guy that's never thrown an NFL pass. But I think it's probably well worth it if they both live up to the potential. And I know that's stating the obvious because, everybody thinks so highly of these guys. But I think both of them have a very, very real chance of turning these rookie contracts into really, really big steals for the organizations because they've both shown their high potential at times. And like I said at the beginning of this, there's just not a whole lot to talk about. I'm obviously trying to get Anthony Bass on at some point. Hopefully that, happens, in which case I'll probably call up my ex-co-host Ben Jordan to show up mainly for moral support, but to ask anything he wants to talk to him about. And definitely, we both thought this Al's brother interview was a lot of fun. I thought it was great having him on. Mix things up so you don't just have to listen to me talk every week. And with that all being said, I have a feeling this week, I've never figured out so far, editing these podcasts, to throw in, sound bites or whatnot to make it sound a little bit better than just me mumbling on and on. I think this week will be the first ever attempt that Gus Cousins makes at trying to load this one up with sound bites. So at this very moment, at the time of recording, I will give it my best shot to see if I can figure out how to overlap sound bites and stuff, because this stupid Windows application I'm using doesn't want to let me do that. So that'll be my goal for the next week. And after this one, you won't have to hear from me for another 7 days, thankfully. So, hopefully by then there will be a lot more to talk about. Maybe by then the NBA will have decided whether it's coming back. Maybe the Players Union will agree to the deal. And maybe the NHL will finally figure out if it's going to restart or not. But until then, I don't have a whole lot else to say. So I guess you'll hear from me next week.